Snow White, the Awakening of the Heart. Some people say that Snow White was awakened by a prince, but some stories carry a gentler, more secret truth hidden within them. They seem simple when told first, and yet, if one listens quietly enough, another meaning begins to stir beneath the surface. This is not merely a tale about beauty, enchantment, and sleep. It is the story of what becomes of the soul when it strays from itself, and of the light that remains, even then, patiently waiting in the dark. Once upon a time, in a kingdom ringed by deep forests and great silences, there lived a young girl called Snow White. She was the king's daughter and lived a beautiful, happy life. But sorrow entered the palace early, and after her mother died, another queen came to take her place. This new queen was beautiful beyond dispute. Her face was flawless, her bearing regal, her splendor admired throughout the land. And yet, beauty gave her no peace. Each day she stood before her mirror, and each day she asked the same question in a voice low and intent. "Tell me, mirror, who is the fairest of all?" For many years the answer pleased her. Then, one morning, the mirror spoke differently. "The fairest is the one who remains true." The queen turned pale. At once she understood. The mirror had not spoken of her, and so her gaze fell upon Snow White. The girl did not try to captivate. She did not strive to shine. She did not measure herself against others, nor hunger for admiration. Snow White moved through the world with a quiet grace, as though some clear spring flowed within her, something gentle, living, unforced. There was a stillness about her, a sincerity, a kind of light that asked for nothing and yet could not help but be seen. And it was precisely this that the queen could not bear. Jealousy entered her heart as dusk enters a room, softly at first, then steadily, until all brightness was gone from it. A day came when she could not endure Snow White's presence no longer. The girl must disappear. So Snow White fled the palace and ran into the forest. Beneath the high branches, the world seemed to change its nature. The air was cooler there, the silence deeper. Time itself slowed among the moss, the roots, the trunks, standing tall as watchmen in the dim of green light. And as she went further beneath that vast canopy of leaves, it seemed to her that something within her, too, was changing its rhythm. At the very heart of the wood, she found a small house. It was neat and humble, with little windows, a low door, and an air of unexpected welcome, as though kindness itself had made a home there. Inside lived 7 dwarfs. They received her with simple goodness, without interrogation, without suspicion, as though her coming had long been known to them in some quiet way. And in their company, life took on a gentler shape. The fire on the hearth, the bread upon the table, the lamp lit at dusk, the sound of work honestly done, the hush of evening settling softly over the room. There, in that modest peace, something in Snow White began slowly to return. Calm came first, then courage, afterwards patience, light-footed joy, the wisdom hidden in ordinary things, a finer attentiveness to the smallest stirrings of life, and at last that quiet trust by which the heart learns to stand upright again. So, little by little, and almost without knowing it, she found her light returning to her. Meanwhile, in the palace, the queen knew no rest. The mirror had fallen silent, and that silence weighed upon her more heavily than any truth. At last, she prepared an apple. Never had fruit seemed more beautiful. Its skin was smooth and lustrous, its redness deep and tempting, and though it held within it as though it held within it the very sweetness of the world. Yet, beneath that loveliness, a shadow had been laid. For illusion rarely arises wearing darkness on its face. More often, it comes adorned in beauty. It draws near with charm. It smiles, and very often it resembles the very thing one most longs for. Disguised, the queen went into the forest and found Snow White alone. Her voice, when she spoke, was soft and almost motherly. "Just one taste, my dear, only one." Snow White looked at the apple. For a moment she hesitated. Sometimes it takes no more than a single flicker of uncertainty, a brief dimming of the inner eye, for a soul to drift away from its own clear truth. At last she raised the fruit to her lips and bit into it. At once she sank into sleep. But it was no ordinary sleep. It was forgetting. The forgetting of her worth. The forgetting of her light. The forgetting of the deepest part of herself, which, though veiled, had never ceased to live. When the dwarfs returned, they found her lying still and white as moonlight. They kept watch beside her in grief and faithfulness. They did not rage against the silence. They did not try to wrench her back by force. They remained with her, sorrowful, patient, steadfast, for love sometimes knows that there are awakenings which cannot be hurried, and journeys which must ripen in secrecy. Time passed. The days moved quietly through the forest. Dawn brushed the leaves with silver. Evening laid its blue hush upon the moss. The wind wandered through the branches like a half-remembered song. And Snow White lay there, motionless, as though withdrawn into some hidden chamber no human hand could reach. Then, one day a prince came riding through that country. He had not set out in secret in search of beauty. He followed no map. Yet something drew him onward, something slight and invisible, like the feeling that sometimes comes before a meeting one was always meant to have. When the prince saw Snow White, he stopped. He did not speak at once, nor did he seek to break the sacred stillness that surrounded her. Instead, he remained near, with the quiet attentiveness one gives to a fragile flame, careful, reverent, almost tender. And in that hush something stirred, very faintly at first, like an ember finding breath again beneath the ash, like light returning to still water, like an old song rising from the furthest chamber of the soul. Snow White's heart trembled, and it was not the prince's hand that awakened her. It was a memory older than sleep, the remembrance of herself, the silent return of her own light. Slowly, she opened her eyes. The world appeared before her fresh and washed, as though the whole earth had been touched by rain and dawn together. And in that moment she understood. Her light had not gone out. It had only waited, quiet, unbroken, faithful, waiting until her heart was ready to recognize it once more. The prince smiled, but only faintly. He knew he had caused nothing. He had only been there, standing at the threshold of an awakening that could come from no one but her. Back at the palace, the queen stood before her mirror one final time. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "Tell me, who is the fairest?" And the mirror answered calmly, "The one who no longer needs to ask." Then the queen understood at last that she had spent her whole life refusing to hear. Something important. But some truths arrive too late, when years have already been consumed in seeking from the eyes of others what no gaze can even bestow. Snow White, meanwhile, did not become once more the girl she had been before. The passage through shadow had changed her inwardly. She was no longer a child searching for her place in the world. She was a woman who had returned to herself. And so she went on, not as the fairest, but as the truest. And if one day you too should feel that you have wandered far from yourself, pause for a moment. Let the silence rest around you. Breathe gently, for your light does not vanish. At times it is veiled. At times it seems distant. At times it falls quiet for a while, but it remains. And when your heart opens once more, it returns with all the softness of dawn. Good night.